A News Special Investigation, we take a look at groundbreaking new research being done on ayahuasca, an ancient psychedelic plant medicine that is showing great promise in addressing the most difficult to treat mental health conditions, and may even change our DNA. This is Gaia News. Dr. Simon Ruffle is a psychiatrist and researcher who led this study, conducted in the Peruvian Amazon.
Ayahuasca is a psychedelic brew that's used in the Amazon rainforest. It's been used for at least hundreds of years, and there's some evidence to suggest that it may have been used for thousands of years. It's used for a wide variety of purposes, normally by indigenous tribes. It's used most commonly now for healing, and there's been a lot of interest from people from the West going to the Amazon rainforest in order to drink ayahuasca, and also ayahuasca is spreading across the rest of the world. It now can be found in pretty much every continent.
Ayahuasca is traditionally taken with a shaman who channels energy through the participant to bring about healing, both psychological and physical. The more Western explanation for how the medicine works has to do with the mechanism by which its active compound, DMT, produces its psychedelic effects.
When you consume ayahuasca, a wide variety of things could happen. So for many people, they get changes in their perception. So they can see things that they don't normally see, maybe that others can't see. Their thoughts change. They might think about things in a different way. There's also lots of purging, and that can be typically vomiting or diarrhea, but it could also be crying or maybe even laughing, purging emotion. Subjectively, it's incredibly difficult to describe an experience on ayahuasca. It can be anything from revisiting old memories, going to distant worlds. Some people even believe that you can have contact with entities that don't exist in this dimension.
The biochemical mechanism by which ayahuasca works has been the focus of multiple studies over the last several decades. Recent research has been looking at the ways in which it reduces activity in certain parts of the brain.
The place that this is most obvious is the default mode network. So the default mode network is a collection of what we call connector hubs within the brain. When you consume ayahuasca, it reduces the activity in the default mode network, which allows the brain to make more connections that it doesn't normally make. So parts of the brain are communicating with each other, and they don't normally communicate with each other. This practically means that you see things in a more objective way. You can think about things in a different way than the way you do in your normal waking state. Some people say that consuming psychedelics makes you physiologically ready for psychological change, which I think is a really nice way of putting it.
Studies of ayahuasca have shown its great promise in treating a host of mental health issues. As the use of ayahuasca is not legal in the United States, research has been conducted in those countries in South America where it is legal.
There have been many studies that have been done into ayahuasca over the last 10-20 years. These seem to suggest that ayahuasca is beneficial in treating conditions such as depression and anxiety. It can help people who have problems with addictions. It can also reduce things like panic disorder. Ayahuasca was found to be very beneficial, very effective in reducing people's depression that was previously deemed incredibly difficult to treat. What's more, it did this extremely effectively, pretty much immediately after drinking ayahuasca.
Carlos Tanner is the director of the Ayahuasca Foundation in Peru, where he has witnessed thousands of ceremonies. He founded the center in 2009 as the result of his own healing journey.
My own personal transformation is a significant one, to say the least. I was a heroin addict in 2003. I woke up in my car underwater because I had blacked out behind the wheel while drinking and driving and doing drugs, and drove my car into a river. I woke up, had to figure out where I was, climbed out the window and swam to shore. And at that point, made a declaration that I would do something drastic to save my life. And that change for me was to go to the Amazon rainforest to drink ayahuasca with a curandero named Don Juan in June of 2003. And in that process, I saw my childhood traumas. I saw how I had inaccurately interpreted the experiences, how I had put the guilt on me. And I could see it all play out in my visions, and yet was also able to affect change and said, I was wrong. That wasn't my fault. And in that moment, release that trauma. That allowed me to find true love in myself again, to be able to love myself and to release depression that had brought me to suicidal states and was really the cause of why I was choosing to do heroin as a source of numbing my problems. And so I never did heroin again, and my life was transformed so much. The rest is history, I guess.
Carlos's Riosbo Research Center at the Ayahuasca Foundation was the setting of a recent study led by Dr. Ruffel, in which 63 retreat participants were assessed before, during, and after a number of traditional ayahuasca ceremonies. The findings were truly compelling.
In this study, we found that participants' levels of depression had decreased immediately after drinking ayahuasca, and this was maintained 6 months later. This was also true for anxiety. It had decreased in the short term and was maintained in the long term. Participants' levels of mindfulness had increased and had their self-compassion. We also found that they perceived traumatic events that happened in their life in a less negative way, both in the short term and 6 months later. We found that participants who had experienced more childhood trauma had greater degrees of a decrease in their depression. And we also found that the level of which a participant underwent a mystical experience, so whether or not they felt connected to God, whether or not they felt outside of time, whether or not they felt at one with nature, was predictive of the decrease in depression that they would have. So the greater the mystical experience, the greater the decrease in depression.
One finding in particular was groundbreaking. Saliva samples showed a clear epigenetic change had taken place as the result of the ayahuasca experience, making this the first study of any psychedelic to look at and show changes in DNA.
To me, if I were to look at the epigenetic results of the study, I would look at the transformation of a personal truth first, and then the genetic expression changing as a result of the consciousness shift.
For more on this revolutionary finding, be sure to watch part 2 of this Special Gaia News investigation on ayahuasca and DNA. For a new perspective, this is Gaia News.
For more information on this topic, check out this content on Gaia.